In 2001, an 8-year-old boy named Jesse Arbogast was attacked by a 7-foot bull shark while he was standing in knee-deep water near Pensacola, Florida. The shark had bitten off one of Jesse's arms and part of his thigh before his uncle pulled it away and wrestled it to shore. After a park ranger shot the shark in the head, Jesse's uncle retrieved the severed arm, put it on ice, and drove it to the hospital where it was successfully reattached. Morticians often use these spiky contacts to keep the eyes of the dead closed during funeral viewings. In the 1980s, a man with severe OCD shot himself in the head in an attempt to commit. Instead of killing him, the bullet destroyed the part of his brain that was responsible for his OCD, and he went on to become a straight-A college student 5 years later.
Wow, so that bullet basically saved his life.
In 1999, skydiver Joan Murray's parachute malfunctioned, causing her to fall 14,500 feet to the ground. Miraculously, Joan survived the fall, thanks to the fact that she landed directly onto a mound of fire ants. Doctors believe that being stung over 200 times by the ants released a surge of adrenaline that kept her heart beating. Refrigerator doors are only magnetic because kids used to die inside of them. Before the Refrigerator Safety Act of 1956, the doors could only be opened by pulling the handle from the outside, which resulted in the deaths of many children who found abandoned refrigerators and got trapped inside of them while playing hide and seek.
Imagine falling from the sky to land on red ants, which is supposed to kill you. But in this case, it saved her. Astonishing.
Angelina Jolie was once so depressed that she tried to hire a hitman to kill her. She felt that a murder would be easier on her family. The would-be hitman talked her out of it by asking her to wait a month and reconsider her decision. Anesthesia awareness happens when a patient under anesthesia is completely conscious but is unable to physically move their body. Patients are fully aware throughout their operation and are able to feel pain without the ability to alert doctors to stop the procedure. In 2007, a 73-year-old man underwent a major surgery and suffered from anesthesia awareness. His resulting PTSD led to prompting a lawsuit against the anesthesiologist. A 42-year-old Russian fisherman was viciously attacked by a bear in 2014, but he was saved when the ringtone his granddaughter installed on his iPhone suddenly went off. Justin Bieber's song Baby miraculously sent the bear running back into the woods. In Houston, Texas, a 19-year-old boy named Rashad died while attempting to play Russian roulette in front of friends. He apparently didn't know how the game works since he tried to use a semi-automatic pistol instead of a revolver. There are over 70 documented cases of transplant patients experiencing the same thoughts and feelings as their owners did in life. People have reported everything from craving their donor's favorite foods to inheriting their talents. It has posed a theory that the cells in our bodies can store memories.
Well, at least now we can say that Justin Bieber's song actually saved a life.
In 2002, a 15-year-old boy became inspired by the terrorist attacks on 9/11. He decided to steal an airplane and fly it into a building in Tampa, Florida. It ended up damaging only one office room, and he was the only person that died. This is a female mental patient from 1904 with her diagnosis of premature dementia carved into her back. Alan Turing was the man who broke the Enigma code during World War II. He is estimated to have shortened the war by 2 years and to have saved more than 14 million lives. He was later charged for being a homosexual and was forced to undergo chemical castration. 2 years later, he committed suicide by cyanide poisoning.
Imagine saving 14 million lives during World War, only to get tortured. Cruel world.
In 1963, Rodney Fox was spearfishing off the coast of Australia when something suddenly pulled him under. Within seconds, Fox was suffering from a punctured lung, ripped diaphragm, pierced scapula, and an exposed rib cage, abdomen, and spleen. After pulling him up from the water, rescuers had to keep his wetsuit on to prevent his organs from spilling out. After 4 hours of surgery and 462 stitches, Rodney Fox lived to tell the tale of surviving one of the worst great white shark attacks in recorded history. Judith Barcy, the girl who voiced Ducky in The Land Before Time, was shot and killed by her own father in a murder in 1988. She was only 10 years old. This is what the end of a species looks like. A keeper in Sudan says goodbye to the last male white rhino in the world, 2018. This is the last photo ever taken of American freediver Nicholas Mavoli. He was attempting to freedive 236 feet deep. He completed the dive, surfaced, gave the OK sign, tried to speak, and then he passed out. He never regained consciousness and died later that day to pulmonary edema.
230 feet? That's way deep.
When Robin Williams met Coco the gorilla for the first time in 2001, he made her smile for the first time in 6 months. When Robin died in 2014, Coco overheard the news and said the word cry in sign language. A girl who grew up in a concentration camp drew this when she was asked to draw a picture of home in 1948. The deacon St. Lawrence was roasted alive on a giant grill during the persecution of Valerian in 258 AD. As he was being executed, he joked with his tormentors, "Turn me over, I'm done on this side." Today, he is the patron saint of chefs, firefighters, and comedians.
That guy was made of titanium.
Famous Austrian composer and painter Arnold Schoenberg had triskaidekaphobia, aka a fear of the number 13. He feared the number so much that he called it 12A instead of 13. For years he was terrified that he would die on Friday the 13th when he was 76, since 7 plus 6 equals 13. In fact, he was so scared of that day that he stayed in bed all night until he essentially scared himself to death. He died of a heart attack just minutes before midnight. As per his request, the creator of Pringles had his ashes stored in a Pringles can when he died. 18 months after colon surgery, an Australian woman returned to the hospital when she was experiencing severe stomach pain. Apparently, the surgeons had accidentally left their scissors inside of her abdomen.
I'm just curious why she didn't sue the hospital. She could have been a millionaire by now.
In a 1974 interview, NBA legend Pistol Pete Maravich said, quote, "I don't want to play 10 years in the NBA and then die of a heart attack at age 40. He played in the NBA for 10 years from 1970 to 1980 and then died of a heart attack in 1988 at age 40. This is a photo of a little African girl in a zoo in Belgium in 1958. The Oxford English Dictionary was mostly written by William Chester Minor, a schizophrenic murderer who cut off his own penis and spent most of his life in a mental institution.
And now we can say the education is really dark.
King Tut was a product of incest as his parents were brother and sister. He had a club foot, a severe overbite, womanly hips, and enlarged breasts. Most experts agree that he probably died as a result of these deformities. The human head can remain conscious and aware for up to 20 seconds after being decapitated. A student was once taking an exam and couldn't handle the stress and anxiety anymore. So he put 2 pencils up his nostrils and headbutted the desk, forcing the pencils through his brain. He died instantly and all the other students got automatic A's.
Well, he saved his buddies, but at what cost?
The first firefighter to die on 9/11 was a 37-year-old man named Daniel Sir. He was killed when a woman jumped from one of the towers and landed on top of him. Founder of CNN, Ted Turner, has a video scheduled to be broadcasted if the end of the world is ever upon us. The Station nightclub fire in Rhode Island was a terrible tragedy that killed 100 people in 2003. But a man named Mike Vargas managed to survive for more than 90 minutes inside the building. He was trampled by a mob trying to escape and only survived because he was insulated by all the bodies burning around him. He walked out with only minor burns on his legs, but still suffers from severe PTSD to this day. In 2015, a Texas father saved his son's life when doctors wrongly declared him brain dead and wanted to take him off life support. He barricaded himself inside the hospital room with a gun and had a 3-hour standoff with a SWAT team until his son squeezed his hand. The son eventually made a full recovery.
That father never gave up, and that is why he's a true hero.
A 19-year-old girl named Olga was camping with her stepfather in Russia when a mother brown bear attacked them. After the bear broke her stepfather's neck and smashed his skull, Olga attempted to flee. But the bear chased her down and soon grabbed her by the legs and started mauling her. Olga then managed to make 3 phone calls to her mother while being eaten alive by the bear and her 3 cubs. In the first phone call, she screamed, "Mom, the bear is eating me. Mom, it's such agony. Mom, help." At first, her mother thought it was a joke, but soon heard the true horror in her daughter's voice and the sound of bears growling and chewing. But she could only helplessly listen in horror to her daughter's screams for mercy. Nearly an hour later, the bears had left her, but Olga knew she was gonna die. She said, "Mom, I don't feel the pain anymore. Forgive me for everything. I love you so much."
Imagine all of the pain and agony and the situation of her mother.
In 1944, 14-year-old George Stinney Jr. was the youngest person ever to be executed in the United States. He was given the electric chair after being accused of murdering 2 young girls in South Carolina. He was exonerated 70 years after his execution in 2014 when a court ruled that he had not received a fair trial. David Reimer was a Canadian man who was raised as a girl after a botched circumcision led to a sex reassignment surgery before he was 2. Upon realizing he was not a girl, Reimer started living as a male at age 15. But after years of suffering from severe depression, he committed at age 38.
Capital punishment and false accusations completely destroyed the lives of innocent people.
After her daughter died of yellow fever in 1872, a heartbroken mother wanted to make sure that her daughter was never alone in times of need. Since the daughter was terrified of storms, the grave was constructed with an entrance leading to a staircase that descends to her coffin. During thunderstorms, the mother would go to the graveyard and enter the tomb to comfort her child. Convicted rapists in Saudi Arabia are often executed by public beheadings. Disney's first water park, called River Country, closed in 2001 after an 11-year-old boy died from a brain-eating parasite he got in the lake. The park still lies completely abandoned to this day. When 13-year-old Ryan White got AIDS from a blood donor in 1984, he was only given 6 months to live. Even though doctors said he posed no risk to other students, he was banned from returning to school by a petition signed by 117 parents. An auction was even held to raise funds to keep him out, and a local newspaper that supported him received death threats. The family was forced to leave town when a bullet was shot through the window of their home. Ryan outlived the doctor's diagnosis by 5 years, dying at the age of 19. Frank Goldsmith was a Titanic survivor who later lived near Tiger Stadium in Detroit. But he said he never took his children to a ball game because the roar of the crowd reminded him of the screams of people dying in the freezing waters.
Surely he wouldn't want to rewind the trauma he endured.
Seth MacFarlane and Mark Wahlberg were both booked to fly on American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane that crashed into the World Trade Center on 9/11. Wahlberg decided last minute to fly to Toronto instead, while MacFarlane missed the flight by 10 minutes due to a hangover. Both have said they've had countless dreams of the scenario in which they got on that plane. During the Holocaust, famous Jewish boxer Shlomo Aruch was forced to fight fellow prisoners at Auschwitz. It was merely for the entertainment of Nazi officers, and the losers would be sent to the gas chambers. Aruch survived over 200 fights over a 2-year span and was freed when the camp was liberated. In 1860, a 20-year-old woman named Rhoda Derry was sent to a mental hospital after growing up with no signs of mental health problems. But she had been acting strange lately and was believed to have been possessed by a demon. For the next few decades, she literally lived in a small basket, and her muscles became so weak that it became impossible for her to move her legs or hips. She eventually scratched at her eyes until she went blind, beat her face until her front teeth were knocked out, and lost the ability to speak. In 1904, she was finally transferred to a different asylum where she would die 2 years later. After 9/11, the rescue dogs searching in the rubble started to become depressed because they weren't finding any live bodies. Rescue workers started to bury themselves in the debris to trick the dogs into thinking they were saving people. It is estimated that just over 100 billion people have died on the planet to date. In 1971, high school student Juliana Kopka was sucked out of an airplane after it was struck by lightning. She fell nearly 10,000 feet still strapped to her chair and lived, only to endure an 11-day walk through the Amazon rainforest to the nearest civilization. She was eventually rescued by some local lumbermen and ended up being the sole survivor of the plane crash.
She not only survived the fall, but she survived the time in Amazon forest as well. That is one brave lady.
If you're a woman who is either very young, very old, rich, poor, stubborn, hangs out with other women, has ever been in an argument, has too many children, has a birthmark, or has had milk turn sour in your fridge, you would qualify as a witch in 1692 Salem and would promptly be executed. Some tumors can contain pockets of hair and teeth, and more rarely, some can even grow more complex organs like eyes, hands, and feet. Polish teenager Iga Jasica unexpectedly woke up in the middle of her brain surgery and calmly asked the doctor, "How's it going?" But she wasn't in any pain, so they talked about cats until the surgery was completed.
I mean, the old Salem era was so horrific. Anything out of ordinary, and they would label you as witch.
In 1994, Mauro Prosperi was competing in a 145-mile endurance event through the Sahara Desert. During the race, a sandstorm disoriented Prosperi, causing him to run nearly 200 miles in the wrong direction. He soon found himself completely stranded in the middle of the desert without any resources. After a few days of suffering, he decided to slit his own wrists, attempting to die a less painful death. But he was so dehydrated that his thick blood clotted up the wounds and he woke up the next day. 9 days later, he was rescued in a completely different country after losing 40 pounds of body weight. He survived off of insects, cactuses, his own urine, bats, snakes, and wet wipes. Flipper was a popular TV series in the 1960s featuring Kathy the Dolphin. But a few years into the show, Kathy committed by intentionally drowning herself. It was likely due to the miserable conditions of her captivity. The traditional last meal for inmates on death row did not begin as a final compassionate act for them. It was otherwise an attempt to bribe their ghosts to not haunt the executioners. Nicknamed the Russian Bird Boy, Vanya Yudin was kept isolated by his mother in a room full of birds in cages. When he was rescued in 2008 at the age of 7, he could only communicate by chirping and flapping his arms. Tom and Eileen Longergan were a young couple from Louisiana on a vacation in the Coral Sea off the coast of Australia. They were scuba diving with a large group in the open ocean and were accidentally left behind. By the time someone realized they were missing, it was too late, and the couple was never found. This is a series of cat paintings by famous artist Louis Wayne from the early 1900s. They capture a slow descent into the varying levels of his schizophrenic episodes. After watching a documentary about women being tortured and killed in a basement, Katrina McGaw realized she was actually living in the same apartment. This is the tomb of little Merritt Beardsley, an 8-year-old boy who died of an incurable illness in 1865. A few days before he died, he told his dad that he was afraid of death because he didn't want to be buried in the dark. So his parents honored his wish and put a window in his tomb. In 2006, a woman who had been missing for 3 years was found dead in her London flat, with the TV still running. In 2002, a Croatian diver got lost in an underwater cave and stabbed himself in the chest to avoid the agony of drowning. It was the first and only known case of someone committing.
And that is why I'm so scared of diving.
Sonny Graham was dying of heart failure when he got the call about a new heart. The donor was 33-year-old Terry Cottle, who had just committed by shooting himself in the throat with a shotgun. After a successful transplant, Sonny started writing to Terry's widow Cheryl. The two ended up falling in love and getting married. Soon, people started to notice that Sonny was taking on some of Terry's personality and characteristics. He started liking things that he never enjoyed before, like beer and hot dogs, which were some of Terry's favorites. 12 years later, Sonny committed the exact same way as Terry, with a shotgun to the throat.